Kristaps Porzingis was a highlight machine in his first preseason outing as a Boston Celtic, and the NBA world is rightfully showing their excitement. For all of his drawbacks and limitations, I think the positives kind of got overshadowed when the trade was announced, and it's understated just how much he can change for a team that's looking to capture number 18. Maybe the most valuable trait of Porzingis' game is that he allows his team to keep as much shooting and spacing on the floor as possible without giving up any sort of size. Since 2021, he's attempted about 5.5 threes a game and knocked down 36% of them. And if those numbers don't really seem elite, keep in mind that Karl-Anthony Towns is the only other center reaching that sort of volume. Whereas a lot of guys have specific spots on the perimeter that they excel in, or can't really do much damage unless they're stationary in the corner, Porzingis isn't just comfortable from anywhere on the arc, but also has some serious range, which makes him an especially big threat from above the break. And because he does so much damage in spots near the top of the key, he changes the geometry of the court by pulling a shot blocker away from the basket, which is especially noticeable when he's actually initiating the offense himself. Plumlee has to come all the way out to the line because he'll take and make that shot, and what that does is clears the paint for opportunities like a backdoor cut to Kuzma and an easy 2 points. Most of Porzingis' time on the perimeter though is spent away from the ball, and just because a large majority of his threes are off the catch or assisted on doesn't necessarily mean that they're easy looks. Keep in mind that we're talking about a player who's listed at 7'3" with a 7'6" wingspan and has a high release point on top of that, so most of the time he just doesn't even see smaller defenders. They don't bother him in the slightest as he just shoots right over the top like a practice dummy. But sometimes, even the best possible contests don't mean much. Rudy Gobert has one of the highest recorded standing reaches in NBA history, and he's only a few inches away from contact with the ball. But for Porzingis, that's just disrespectful. Because he'll shoot over the top of any contest, the standard rules of helping near the rim and recovering to the perimeter don't really work. Herb Jones slides down to the paint for just a very brief moment, and even though he's able to close that space by the time the ball reaches the corner, again, it's like he's not there. Another thing you'll see with Porzingis is that he's more than comfortable stepping into his shot with forward momentum, so a lot of his opportunities actually come early in the offense or in semi-transition as a trailer. This is a nightmare to cover because while the defense is scrambling to protect the basket, someone also has to find the 7'3" sniper and offer proper resistance. And to make things that much tougher, he can also put it on the deck and attack closeouts. He's always going to draw more aggressive contests than the average shooter because of the absurdly high release point, and if he beats that first line of defense and help isn't ready to meet him right away, there's just nothing you can do to protect the rim. Even when there is a second body in position to wall off the paint, he's pretty good at using his length to create a lane, throwing a pound dribble straight into 2 long steps on his way to a dunk. And in the event that he does fake and drive, but gets cut off by his own defender, he's got the bump mid-range game in his bag as well. In many ways, he kinda serves as a supersized wing out there, and in typical wing fashion, that means you can run him off of curl screens. Derek White stays attached to him the whole way, but there's just no possible way for him to recover and get a hand up from behind. Part of the reason he got labeled a unicorn is how well he moves at that size. I'm not sure how many 7-footers, let alone 7'3" players are capable of running off of screens on the perimeter and aren't only a threat to shoot, but slash as well. Not only that, but he's actively making reads and countering in these situations. Plumlee looks to shoot the gap, so instead of using the screen, Porzingis darts into a backpedal, jabs right before attacking left with a 1-dribble pull-up jumper. That's not to say he isn't still flawed as a perimeter guy with the ball in his hands though. The natural drawback of having that much size and length and trying to dribble is that securing the handle is tough and prevents him from squeezing through any tight gaps. As a result, when he does attack and defenders slide into his lane, more times than not, he's going to pick up his dribble early and settle for a tougher look. This wouldn't be too big of a deal if he wasn't already flawed as a finisher. The high-flying, above-the-rim finishes are tough, but when he doesn't have space to take off like that, there isn't much versatility, and I'm not too big on his overall touch. He tends to miss a decent amount of freebies by just putting too much heat on them. For these reasons, you still want him doing traditional big things, just that you can spice it up a bit because of that unique skill set as a scorer. This stands out when he's used as a screener because most commonly he's looking to pop out to the top of the key, and that shooting threat means that playing ball screens in a drop coverage doesn't really work. Take this play for example. Turner's in a high drop as Porzingis just slips out to the perimeter, and even though Buddy Hield rotates over from one pass away to contest, it was just too much space for a high quality look. Another problem defenses run into with Porzingis as a screener is that switching is no longer a viable option because he's more than capable of attacking mismatches. He's really good at slipping the screen as soon as he feels that switch coming, and then he uses his massive frame to seal off low post position. This time he doesn't get the ball, but instead of backing up to the perimeter as Barton drives, he hangs around the paint so that he can clean up on the offensive glass for an easy 2. This time it's on an inbounds play where he slips a pin down and seals off post position, and although Kevin Durant is one of very few who can rival his length, with a little shoulder bump he's stepping into an easy jumper. Because Porzingis has a reputation for being soft and has a really weak center of gravity that enables sturdier guys to bump him off his spot, a lot of teams have tried putting wings on him as primary matchups. But over the years, he's gotten really good at sealing position for quick scoring moves over the top. He's such a massive target that no matter how aggressively defenders try to prevent him from touching the ball, even weaker passers don't have much trouble getting it to him on the entry, and from there it's just easy offense. Even from a touch further, I think he's better at using his body than a lot of people give him credit for. He's more than willing to play physical, and to make up for his lack of lower body strength, he'll back his way in with the shoulder. Remember, all he has to do is get within like 8 to 10 feet of the basket because those short jumpers over the top are basically a layup to him. He's capable of turning and shooting over either shoulder, but I definitely think the right shoulder fadeaway has become a staple in his attack, and there's just no way to take him out of his comfort zone. Another thing you'll see him do a lot is patiently wait for defenders to get handsy or extend their arms, and then he'll shoot up through the contact to generate free throws. The overall willingness to attack through physicality, the way his high release forces guys into overly aggressive contests, and the little cookie jar trick all pair together to create some really nice foul drawing. Last year, he attempted more than 7 free throws every 75 possessions, good for the 94th percentile. Just for reference, Tatum led the Celtics last season at 8.3, Brown was a distant second at 5.3, and no other player was over 4, so that's a pretty big addition. One problem I do have with Porzingis as a post-up guy though, is that once he looks to score, I think he can really struggle with tunnel vision, so come playoff time, I question how much offense you can actually run through him. It's not really a willingness thing to me, just a lack of vision, because when help or a double comes off the catch, or it's easy to see, he's shown to be a guy who can counter. Here's one where he's looking to back down Batum, and Kawhi aggressively helps from the middle of the floor, but with some awkward spacing, it's not a pass that's going to counter the coverage, but instead dodging the help so that he can still get to his spot for a little jumper. Last season, Porzingis averaged 4 points per game in the post, 5th in the NBA, but what stands out to me is the absurd efficiency, 1.18 points per attempt. If we only look at the top 15 guys in post-up volume, only Jokic was more efficient. Boston has never had that type of interior layer to their offense during the Jason Tatum era, and the inside-out dynamic can unlock a lot of good things for them, so it's definitely something to keep an eye on. In addition to the post game, he's also really good at the more traditional face-up isolations, and that's because he'll just rise right over the top of whoever's in front of him. This is another way for him to punish size advantages. He'll keep the ball high, use those shoulder bumps and some exaggerated pivots for even more space, and it's pretty much guaranteed to be a good look at the basket. Even against bigs, you'll see the same things, putting together combinations of fakes and jabs to keep his defender guessing, and he doesn't even need an inch of breathing room to comfortably pull the trigger. The reason those jab steps are effective is because he actually is a threat to put the ball down and attack. This time it's 2 dribbles into an aggressive spin to set up a little push shot. But the handle is still limited, as I mentioned, and I do think he has a pretty weak left, which, probably does fit with the Celtics. I also question his shot selection at times. Like, he can throw up some pretty weird attempts, but then again, because of the size, there's not really such a thing as a bad shot with him, and that has its own value. If you're in a tight situation or late in the shot clock and just need a release valve, Porzingis is your guy, because at worst, he's giving you an uncontestable jumper that he can knock down at a high clip. Last year, he shot 48% on about 8 mid-range shots every 75 possessions. Only 9 other players reached both of those marks. The mid-range game is huge for countering different defensive looks, especially when it's coming from a guy who has unlimited access. And I don't think there's a situation that better encompasses how important it can be than when you're going against a zone. If you remember these most recent playoffs, Boston really struggled with Miami's zone, and there are a ton of different issues you can point to, but I think it primarily comes down to not having that guy who can just operate in the middle of the floor. We saw it in the finals. Jokic just completely dissected the zone, and although Porzingis isn't giving you that all-time passing, what he does give you is a massive target to hit in the paint who can turn and score over the defense at will. As Washington moves the ball around the perimeter, you can see him just flashing to different passing angles so that they can break the zone. And off the catch, he actually draws 2 bodies, so instead of putting up a shot, he finds a cutter for some easy offense at the rim. So, just to recap the type of talent we're talking about here, the Celtics just added a 7'3" big man who can operate on the perimeter in a wide variety of ways, including running off of screens, screening himself, or trailing in early offense, and in those situations, he's a threat to get to all 3 levels. Inside the arc, he's one of the game's most efficient post-up guys, can face up and isolate with some elite mid-range scoring, and is an ultimate zone breaker. That versatility helped him put up more than 26 points per 75 possessions on efficiency about 4.5% ahead of the league's average. That's some serious production that probably would have gotten a lot more attention had he played on a more competitive team. Now he's surrounded by more scoring, playmaking, spacing, and defensive talent, so who's to say he can't be even more proficient as a scorer in this upcoming season? One looming question, and a pretty big one at that, is the health factor. Boston's already operating on a short rotation, especially in the front court, and Porzingis has only played more than 60 games in a season 1 time since LeBron was on the Cavaliers. They're taking a pretty big risk by trusting that he can not only make it to the playoffs, but make it through multiple rounds without going down. If that does turn out to be the case, there's not a cell in my body that questions how much of an upgrade this is for them offensively, especially against the team that just knocked them out. And considering the new look Milwaukee Bucks seem to be the team to beat, having someone who can stretch the likes of Brook Lopez or Giannis can really change the dynamic of that series. Of course, there's one more thing that I didn't cover, the defensive side of the ball. Going into this video, I actually planned to do a pretty in-depth look on his defense and how it fits, but I got carried away with the offense and don't want to keep you here all day, so I'll just give the spark notes. His size and length are incredibly disruptive, especially around the rim, and when he's in position, there aren't too many guys better at altering shots. However, the mental aspect doesn't seem to be at what you'd expect from a true defensive anchor, so he'll miss some rotations, won't have the best positioning and drop coverage, things of that nature. His lack of lower body strength leaves him vulnerable to contact, and I don't like him as a guy in the post, but that's what they have the brick wall Al Horford for. He can move somewhat well for someone with size, but is still vulnerable in space, so more often than not, you want to keep him as close to the basket as possible. How that all fits with the Celtics, only time will tell. I definitely don't think buy-in will be a problem, and I think his rim protection has some big-time value if utilized properly. You pair that with the offense, and I come away feeling that he might just be the most underrated player in the NBA. Whether that comes from playing in Washington, the injury history, I'm not sure, but he's got some seriously unique skills, especially when considering his physical makeup. and that just opens up so much opportunity for his new team to weaponize. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Porzingis. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.